Welcome back. Here is my solution to Challenge 7 or Chapter 4, Car Renter. Briefly, the objective was to create a typical car rental app with 4 forms, a main component and a signals file. You were to use objects to store data for each form and one for the form flow. The requirements document gave all the details, and the zip file contained all the starter files. Okay, let's get started. I want to briefly mention that you should have a root, i.e. src roots and car rental folder with a file plus page.svelte, and that file imports the main component ch7_rental.svelte and runs it. This allows the navigation, apps and car rental to be routed to that file and run the main component. You should also add the main component to your exercise list.json so that it will be available in the exercise selector. Okay, for a change I am going to start with the main component, ch7_rental.svelte, which will be in the Data Chapter 4 folder. Open file ch7_rental.svelte, Data Chapter 4. First, we import the forms and components needed. We have components for the initial form, vehicle selection, selected vehicle and rental agreement. Next, we have signal file functions. Then, in case the components exited without restarting the entire app, the signals will still be active, so I need to reset the data and flow. This will become clearer when we look at the signals file. The show initial form is set to true so that in the markup the initial form will be conditionally rendered. In the markup we conditionally render whichever forms the rental flow shows as true, which is set in each component. And that's the main component. Very simple, right? Next, let's look at the signals file, chapter 4 to carrental.signals.svelte.js. Okay, this starts with a few consts for setting default values for the forms and form flow as objects. So InitialForm data is for all the initial forms data, InitialExtras form is for the insurance and options checkboxes recording what was selected, and InitialVehicle form is for the vehicle form data for the filtering, sorting and selected type. Rental flow is for controlling the flow or visibility of the forms components. And now something a little different. Export const rentCon, short for rental constraints. So here I'm exporting a const object containing the constraints logic to apply to the dates and times and age rental, keeping that logic centralized in signals and then applying these consts in InitialForm.svelte. It does make InitialForm a little harder to read, and this is a trade-off you make with trying to place logic signals. You then must reference it elsewhere. Is a database you could build those constraints into the DB. Next, we initialize the signals and then have the standard getters and setters. Below those we have the reset functions used to reinitialize the signals. And then the setRentalFlowItem function allows you to update one or more items as required, and similar for extras. Function validate pickup time applies the logic required for pickup time, i.e. if today must be 2 hours from now, allow time to prepare vehicle, and if not today default to current time. Function update drop-off details sets the drop-off date to a default number of days after pickup, rentCon.default drop-off days, and sets the drop-off time to the pickup time. Also added here get rental days. It's not a getter, just logic placed here rather than in the calling component, rental agreement, and returns the rental days based on the start and dates. Function calculate total does what it says. Some items are daily charges and others are one-off. Called from rental agreement. And that's the signals file. Next, let's look at the InitialForm.svelte signals, and the rest of the components are to be placed in chapter 4 carrental folder. Open InitialForm.svelte in chapter 4 carrental. Import signal functions, airports and myDate functions. Import consts from signals for data, time restraints, keep logic in signals. GER data from getters to set local state. Needed to do this as you can't bind value to getters as they're getters, not writable, so by setting to local state and using the getters, the data will be current, and we can then use the local state for input. Handle view vehicle sets the next form, show vehicles, to true, controlling display through signals, triggering a reaction in the main component. Next, reactives. An effect to set the pickup location to the first item in the array, and if not yet selected, set this also to the drop-off location. One more reactive, a derived function to check that all data entered. Used to disable view vehicles button. That's the script. In the markup we display all the inputs. The airports.json is used for the pickup and drop-off locations. Using form data for inputs as local state and then handle view vehicles call set form data to update signal. The logic for dates and time is in the signals file but imported from there and used here. Note that the pickup date is limited by rentcon.maxPickupDate, which is imported from signals. This is calculated using myDateFN, new date, 30, setting the maximum allowed pickup date to 30 days from today. Similarly for other fields with constraints. Then you have the View Vehicles button, which calls the local handle View Vehicles function, which sets the Show Vehicles to true. And if we take a quick look at the markup in ch7_rentals, we see that we will get the InitialForm rendered still because we haven't changed Show Initial Form, it's still true. And we will get the vehicle selection component rendered since Show Vehicles has now been set to true. Okay, and that's Initial Form. Let's move on then to the next form to be displayed, Vehicle Selection. Open vehicleselection.svelte, chapter for a car rental. Import signals, and import the vehicle data and extract the vehicle types used later to filter. Likewise, we extract the vehicle class also used for filtering. Then set state for vehicle form as we will need to bind value to a couple of elements. Function SelectedVehicle is used to update the signal for form data and flow, setting the show selected vehicle to true, the next form, and the show extras to true, the insurance options, and set show vehicles to false as we no longer need to see that one. Next, we have a reactive for the filtering. Notice that when we selected a vehicle type or class, the list of vehicles reactively updated. That's what's happening here. As you change the filter or sort, this effect handles that. And the next effect is to scroll up the screen to focus on vehicle type. In the markup I'm using a bind, this which just assigns a reference to that select element to vehicleForm.SelectedVehicle.type. And that's what's being used in the effect to scroll. For the vehicle types, we use the extracted types from the data, and for the class filter the extracted classes. Then we have the sort option and next the display of the filtered vehicles based on the class, type and sorted as per selection. And because this is in the markup, any changes made will be retendered. Note the images. These were provided and should be in the static images folder. Note also the onClick which calls the function SelectedVehicle, which updated the vehicle form signal and sets the flow control signal, setting the next form, show selected vehicle, to true and sets show vehicles to false. These trigger accordingly in the main component hiding or displaying forms as required. And that's vehicleselection.svelte. Next up we will look at selected vehicle, which is rendered when show selected vehicle is true. Open SelectedVehicle.svelte, chapter for car rental. Import signals. Set extras form as local state based on the getter as need to modifier, bind to the inputs for extras and you can't bind to getters. Function proceed to checkout is only accessible if the continue to checkout button is enabled, i.e., at least one insurance option is selected. It updates the extra signal, resets rental flow, and sets only show checkout, true, ensuring previous forms are hidden, top of form. Bottom of form. Reactive derived for confirming that at least one of protection items selected. Will use to disable continue to checkout button. And that's the script. In the markup, we display the selected vehicle details and image and we have the insurance and options and we bind, check to update the extras form properties to show what has been selected or not. Note that the amounts, such as the protect the car cost, are obtained from the selected vehicle. The selected vehicle object includes all details from vehicles.json. These amounts are displayed to help users decide whether to select a particular option. The rest of the markup is similar. Button 4, Continue to Checkout, is disabled if one of the protection items is not selected and on clicking runs the Proceed to Checkout function as described above. And that's selected vehicle. Let's move on to rental agreement component. When show checkout is true, this will trigger the main component to display the rental agreement form. Open RentalAgreement.svelte, chapter for car rental. Now, I have created another component, RentalSummaryRow, for the summary rows, so that's imported and I will cover that next. Signal functions imported and we set state for the booking confirmation and agreed rental. Now I have variable rental days declared, but I am not using $state, intentionally. I could and the code would run just the same. Note that SvelteKit runs code once and compiles, so you have to keep reactivity in mind. So if we don't use $state, nor derived, nor effect, how is rental days reactive? because it calls getRentalDays, a function in Signals, which is using getFormData, which is reactive. So, it's not always necessary to use $state with let, as you can see in this case. But these are exceptions. Functions next. Function printRentalAgreement should work on Mac and Windows and just prints the current window. Function confirmBooking updates state and updates extras form data in case you might want to save this data and later need confirmation that the user did make the booking and confirm they accepted the terms. Once confirmBooking is made, no further changes can be made and you exit or click Start a new rental. Function start new booking is just that and resets all data form flow and sets the initial form to true, which kicks in the main component to display that initial form. Toggle agreement checks or removes the check from the I agree to terms box. Next, the markup. Much of this display comes from form data, so we use the getFormData signal function. Some from vehicle form, so use the getter for that. Next, I use another component RentalSummaryRow with a key that tells the component which line I am printing. Initially, this was a lot of duplicated similar code, and yes, a snippet was considered, but as we found before, at times calling a snippet and the snippet itself are as long as the code you are trying to reduce, and ironically this may be also, but it does shorten the code in this component. So RentalSummaryRow is called with a key equivalent to the names used in the vehicles.json, which names are the same as the names used in the extras form except for the prefix check in the latter. Then the total is displayed and an agreement checkbox and buttons to book rental and start a new rental. When the booking is made, no further changes are allowed, so the agree checkbox and book buttons are disabled, leaving the only options to print the agreement, start a new rental or exit. The print rental agreement is not enabled until the booking is made. And that's it for the agreement component. The last component is the RentalSummaryRow component. Open RentalSummaryRows.svelte. This imports a few signals and the key prop is extracted from the prop sent from rental agreement. Here again we are declaring some variables without using sat8 since these are using getters. As I want the labels for the rows to be easier to read that the keys passed, I have a label map. A little juggling here with variable selected. If key equals rate, then selected is true, otherwise selected is whatever was recorded in the extras form data, now extras, and as the fields there end in check, that's what it's added here. And daily rate is juggled. If the key is rate, then we get the rate from the selected vehicle, otherwise it gets the key property from the selected vehicle, but remove this check. Similarly for cost per rental. So for example, if we are writing the line for medical, the key was passed to this component as medical, but the selected added check, so selected equals medical check. Daily rate would be vhival.selectedvehicle.medical, e.g. 9.99. Cost per day would be the daily rate equals 9.99. Cost per rental would be daily rate * rental days, e.g. 9.99 times 10 is equal to 99.90. / in the markup we display the row with a class for the label to show this in red of not selected, the label map used so that we translate the key to meaningful sigil description AMD, the cost per day and cost per rental in 2 columns. And that's the RentalSummaryRow component complete. And that is a wrap on the challenge. I hope that you gained something useful from that, and if you did, please like and subscribe. It only takes a moment of your time for months of mine. Thank you. Coming up, another challenge, another video. See you there.